Hi, and welcome to today's webinar, which is going to be Getting Started with me, Trevor Conquergood from Sunset Stitches. Getting started, I guess I should say, getting started with Digitizer software with me, Trevor Conquergood from Sunset Stitches. Anyway, thanks very much for attending today's class, and I hope that everybody's been able to find their way into the webinar. I know that there'll be several people who may be attending one of my webinars for the very first time today. And so what I'm going to do before I get started just with the actual content that I prepared for today's class, I'll just give you a little bit of an idea of what you can expect. So first of all, I'm using GoToWebinar to present this class. And when you join the class or register for the class, I guess, you should be receiving an email with a link to join. And at class time, when you follow that link to join, what you'll get is you should be able to see my computer screen by now, and you should be able to hear my voice. And there is also, I guess, a small control panel that is for the webinar. And if you don't see that immediately, it may be minimized. It kind of hides itself. And when it hides itself, to find it, you'll look on the right-hand side of your computer screen for a small orange arrow. And if you click on that orange arrow, it will show you the control panel. And you'll see in that there is a questions box. And so with that questions box, it's your ability to communicate with me during the class. Now, that said, I expect to have a large attendance for today's class, and I don't generally look for brand new questions during the class. What I like is when people want to ask me questions that they send me an email, and I'll share with you my email address in a moment, and then I'm able to prepare to answer those questions in the classes. So really, the questions box is going to be just in case there's something specific that comes up during class. And so I'm the only presenter of the class, and so once I get presenting and doing my topics, I won't be keeping my eyes on the questions box, but what I'll do is periodically I'll check it and make sure that everything's going okay. Now, I know from experience, I've done nearly 100 of these webinars now, and generally speaking, we don't have too many troubles. If you don't have a very good internet connection, specifically the speed of the internet, you may find that the video could be delayed, or my voice may not match up with the words or with the actions on the screen, and usually that's got to do with internet speed. One thing you can do is make sure that nobody else in your household is using your internet speed. For example, maybe your kids are watching Netflix in the room next door, and the video that they're watching is occupying some of your available internet speed. Certainly having your computer directly connected to the internet versus wirelessly connected, that can also help. So those are little things that you can do. Now, if you have any troubles with the class, one thing that I know has worked for people would be, let's say that it freezes or something. You could close the webinar and then go back to the email that you received and rejoin the email with the link in the email. Rejoin the class, and sometimes that clears up problems. Anyhow, that's pretty much all I had to say about the class. Now, one thing I wanted to just start out with is apologizing that I had to delay this class, and I appreciate everybody's patience. I had a bit of a summer cold, which has been kind of getting me down, and I've received lots of thanks and no worries. So I appreciate all of the well wishes, and yes, I'm feeling better. I have my energy back. I'm not completely over the cold, so if I sound a little bit stuffy, sorry, I did my best with a bit of cold medication. But anyway, it's going to be a fabulous class, and it's something that a lot of people have been asking for. So that's what you can expect, that for the next hour to hour and a half, you can just enjoy, listen to what I have to say, and it's my goal to really help people get started using Digitizer software. Now, before I go ahead and get started, one thing that I want to do is just explain a couple of things, and I'm going to start by simply telling you who the heck am I, because not everybody's going to be familiar with me, and I guess what I offer and what it is that I do in my history. So, I told you already, my name is Trevor Conquergood, and Sunset Stitches is the name of my embroidery studio. You can see here on my webcam, this is me, and I'm in my home-based office here in sunny Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. And welcome, everybody. Now, I learned to do embroidery from my mom and dad in a family-based business. I first learned to digitize back in 1984. My father, George, bought his first embroidery machine in 1980, and by 1984, my father had begun to sell embroidery machines for a company called Barradon. And he sold commercial embroidery machines for about a decade, and I became the programmer of the designs for my father's business and also for the customers that he was setting up with commercial embroidery businesses throughout Western Canada. And so here you can see some funny photographs of me from back in the 80s and early 90s when I was digitizing designs as a custom digitizer. So that's really where I learned custom digitizing for the commercial embroidery field. And of course I listened to my dad sell embroidery machines, and I learned all about doing embroidery in this family business, which you may have heard of. It's called Digitize. Now, Digitize became known for our, I guess, high-quality embroidery designs, and eventually we started to sell those as clip art for embroidery or stock designs. And so I guess in the heyday at Digitize, we were probably a small team of about 12 people with artists drawing big paper drafts. You can see me here in this picture saddled up to a digitizing tablet. And back in the 1980s, digitizing was done on a digiboard, and I used to literally draw the stitches onto the paper and then punch those stitches, and it actually came out on a paper tape, which I've got one right here. This is sort of a little bit for fun. So here we are in the 1980s. This is a paper tape, and on this paper tape you will see there are holes. And those holes actually are what told the embroidery machine how to work. I used to put the paper tape across the front of my embroidery machine, and there was like a sort of tape reader that would read that tape. And anyway, all of these holes actually meant something. And if you can imagine, back in the 1980s, to be able to edit this embroidery design, what I would have to do is I would decide what part I wanted to fix, and I would redigitize that part of the design, and then we'd fish through this tape, and we would find the spot that we were fixing, and we would cut the tape, and then we would splice a new piece of tape together. And that was embroidery digitizing editing back in the 1980s. So anyway, I just thought I would show that for a little bit of a laugh. Certainly today, here in the year 2012, it's just an amazingly different situation with the fantastic software that we're going to learn about today from Janome called Digitizer software. Anyhow, so I learned from my mom and dad in a family business, and like I said, at one point we had a dozen people, and so I had naturally learnt to train other people within our family business, and I trained many people in sort of an apprenticeship situation where I would help them sort of one design at a time. And it wasn't until probably around the year 2000 that I actually was invited to come to an embroidery conference for the home embroidery market. And that was my first opportunity to really learn about the domestic sewing machines that could do embroidery. And it was right about that time that the domestic embroidery machine was becoming connected to the computer, and it was now something that I could actually take a design that I'd made and then save it in a format that you could read and sew on your home embroidery machine. And so anyway, it was a very exciting time for me learning about all of these new embroidery consumers or customers or users, people that were doing embroidery not so much for commercial, but a lot of the people were doing it for fun and for hobby. And something I learned right away is that as much as the people in the commercial world, wanted to learn about embroidery, most of us were really just focused on our business, and there was not a lot of people interested in experimenting. And what I found in the domestic sewing world was that everybody was just so thirsty to learn and experiment, and so many interesting techniques began to develop because of the fact that people who had these amazing embroidery tools and toys were willing to play with them and experiment and try new things. And I was hooked right away. I learned something about myself, and that was, as much as I love to digitize and create embroidery designs, I love to share the knowledge that I've gained over the last 25 or almost 30 years of creating embroidery. Anyhow, I learned about Janome at that very first conference I went to. And what I found was that the Janome software was very similar to the commercial software. I'd been a customer from a company called Wilcom since about the mid-1990s. And I had grown to be a training partner for Wilcom and people that had Wilcom software in the commercial world. And so when I saw the Janome software, I realized that it was actually made by the same company, and it was very easy for me to transition into this new embroidery software called Digitizer by Janome. And of course, at that time, it was Digitizer version number 1. Anyway, I realized right away that I had a real thirst to do training, and I traveled. I became good friends with the people from Janome. They have invited me to train at Janome conferences around the world. I've visited Japan, Taiwan, Thailand to visit Janome factories, visited Janome conferences in countries from Germany to Scandinavia, and of course in America and Canada. And I've just met literally hundreds, if not thousands, of Janome sewing store owners and staff, and it's been very interesting and exciting for me to have that opportunity. So that's a little history of me, and why am I an embroidery trainer, and how did I become an expert in digitizing and teaching people about using the Janome software. So it was really, I left my family business, and I still partner with my mom and my dad at Digitize, their offices in Saskatoon, and we do a lot of networking together. But really, I started Sunset Stitches about 2008, specifically so that I could be at home with my family while they were young and growing up, and with the goal of focusing on doing embroidery education. And that's all I do, is teach people about embroidery and embroidery software. And so over the last about 4 years, I've been developing products. And what I'd like to show you, if I come back to my website, I'll just go through this because I get a lot of questions, and I figure it's a good opportunity for me to clarify. The first video I made was for actually Digitizer Pro version 2. It's a DVD video guide that's about 2 hours long, shows how to use all of the features of Digitizer Pro version 2. And that version 3 came out, and so I made a new video guide for version 3, and that's this one here. And again, this one is now a double DVD. It's like 4 hours long, and I go through the version 3 of the software, and I just show how to use all of the tools and features of that program. I'd also made videos for Customizer 11,000 and Customizer 10,000, and I also made a video for Digitizer Junior when it was in its version 3. Another video I've made for Janome software is how to use the Janome cross-stitch program, and that's something that is an add-on to the Janome Digitizer product. You can actually purchase it as a separate program, and I've got a training video for that as well. And this was a special video that I made for people, again, kind of back to version 3 for the Gigahoop and the Macro Hoop, and people that had those, Digitizer software and wanted to learn more about doing split designs. So those are the softwares that I developed. Now, when Janome came out with version 4, which is what is current today, MBX, I made a DVD video guide for version 4. But the difference is Janome purchased that directly from me, quite proud of that, and they actually included in the box. So everybody who has a copy of Digitizer MBX, you'll have received a training video that was prepared by me. And that training video, all of these DVD video guides specifically deal with the software. How do you use the tools of that software? And that's what I talk about, is this is how to use the lettering tool, and this is how to use all of the tools. So very specifically, how to use the software. And going forward, I started something that's called Digitizer Workshop, and I'll just show you. I've produced 12 DVDs in the Digitizer Workshop series. And these DVDs are not about how to use the software as much as they're about how to digitize designs. We talk about things like push and pull and underlay, layering, overlapping, and I do it in a specific situation where I create embroidery designs and I share the designs and the artwork with the people who are taking these classes. Now, the very first one I did was Digitizer Workshop number 1, and that's sort of where it started, but I never really went from the beginning. I always assumed that people had sort of learned a certain amount. So today's class is meant to get us started. It's really the first time I've done a video just for, if you were brand new, this is a great place to start. Now, that said, Digitizer Workshop number 1 has lots of really great videos that are also kind of right at that beginning level. And I sort of progressed from there. Digitizer Workshop number 2 and number 3 are specifically little projects. And the first 3 videos I made were prior to me having live classes. They were specifically videos that I recorded, and so they have like printable lesson plans with step-by-step instructions on doing a design. But things kind of progressed, and the videos number 4, 5, and 6 have a recorded project that I've done, but they also have the very first recorded classes. So Digitizer Workshop number 4 has the Digitalk classes number 1A, B, C, and D. And 5 has 2A, B, C, and D, and 6 has 3A, B, C, and D. So I started doing the live classes at number 4. And now from number 7, 8, and 9, they're specifically just the live classes. There's no more pre-recorded video. Everything's done live. And this is when I introduced the membership so that you could actually join as a member of my classes. And as a member, you automatically receive the class invitation. You automatically receive a link to download the class recording. Many of my members, I don't attend the classes live. I'd say about a third of the members actually attend live classes. And of course, all of the members download the class to keep it on their computer. And then after I've recorded a series of classes, I press that on a DVD, and the members all receive the DVD in the mail. And at that point in time, new people could purchase these DVDs. So that's what this is all about. Now, if you're wanting to follow the progression from number 1 to number 9, I was using version 3, Digitizer Pro. Actually, it was Digitizer MB, but same thing, version 3. And when version 4 came out, that's when I was starting Digitizer Workshop number 10. So 10, 11, and 12 are using MBX software. That said, I still have many members that are using version 2 and version 3, and I always approach the lessons in a way that says, well, this is how we do it in version 4, but if you have version 3, this would be the similar steps. So certainly the lessons are valuable for anybody that uses Digitizer software, regardless of what version. But those are I get a lot of questions about those things, and I wanted to just kind of review all of that. Now, today I'm working on Digitizer Workshop number 13, and today's class, Getting Started, number 1, is a very specific class. It will be included on the Digitizer Workshop number 13 DVD, but I'm setting this Getting Started series apart from the regular classes. I teach 2 classes every month for people with Digitizer Workshop. And for $10 a month, people can join as a member and get those 2 classes every month. And now this new series, Getting Started, is in addition to that. There's no additional fees. If you're a member of Digitizer Workshop, this will just be an additional class that you receive. The thing that's different is this Getting Started series is really meant to help somebody who's brand new. And so, for example, if I have a new member who joins at Digitizer Workshop number 14 or maybe number 15, I won't need to tell them, you don't have to go back and start with number 1. I'll provide the Getting Started series to all members, regardless of when they join. That way everybody has that ability to kind of get started, and because the Digitizer Workshop classes, the regular classes, just like the one I did last time, Digitizer Workshop 13E, they're intended for anybody who uses Digitizer software, regardless of your level of experience. There's something for everyone. Most classes have somewhere between 6 and 10 topics, and I provide the artwork and the designs. I provide a printable class review that helps you know what's on the disk, and of course I provide the video. If you collected all 12, I'll just show you. This is my copy here. So I've got a book, and inside this book there's over 220 printed pages. Every one of those printed pages is a class review that will show the person what exactly was the topics of that class, and how to find it on your DVDs. So yeah, all 12 DVDs, the first 12 is over 220 pages. It's over 100 hours of video and dozens of embroidery designs. That's what I've done up till now, and that kind of brings you up to today. So I'm sorry I had to spend the first 20 minutes of class talking about who the heck am I and what have I done up until now, but I get a lot of questions for that, and because I intend to widely distribute today's class, it seemed like a really good opportunity for me to make sure that everybody understood what I've done and what it is that I do. Okay, so all of that said, I'm going to check my control panel and make sure that I'm not experiencing any questions or difficulties. There are a couple questions, and they are specific questions. And just so you know, for people, I prefer to receive these questions in my email. And that's because I like to keep my class on time. I usually have a game plan about what I'm going to do. And so it's not really easy for me to read questions and come along. So I'll take a good look at the end of class to see if there's any questions that I can specifically answer during class. But certainly if I don't answer your question, please feel free to email me. Now, why don't I just pop over to my desktop for a moment? This is how you can get in touch with me. My email address is trevor@sunsetstitches.com. You'll find on my website that it's easy to find the information. It's sunsetstitches.com. You're certainly welcome to ring me up on the phone. And yeah, okay. So this is what we're going to do. Today's class is called Getting Started, and what my goal is to assume that you're brand new and you've just installed your software. Now, if you're looking for help installing the software, I'm not actually the most knowledgeable person. Now, that said, yes, I've installed Digitizer software for myself and updated my software many, many times, and I have lots of experience. But generally speaking, if people have difficulty installing software, you're going to need to visit Janome to ask for technical support. And on Janome's website, let's see, I can just probably pop that up for us. Why don't we see if we can't just go there right now. Janome.com. Looks like it's going to actually take me to the global site. I'm just going to back that to Janome.com, specifically Janome.com. Sorry, I just have to type the right address in. And so when you go to Janome.com, what we'll find, and I believe that's loading up, is that there is a page. So if you need help in installing your software, here it comes. I'll just direct you to where you need to go. So certainly, first of all, I find that in the Learning Center, we can check for software updates, and that's a good place. I'll show you during today's class how to know what version your software is. And one of the things I love about Janome is that periodically they have free updates for their Digitizer software with new features, new techniques, new additions, I guess, as well as any corrections that need to be done. If you need help from Janome, we can go to their, let's see here. I have to remember myself how to get there. Project Center. Some of you are saying, Trevor, it's right where you're not looking. Contact us up here at the top. Now, from here, there's information for the technical support. There's you can do sort of email inquiries or telephone inquiries. And so I suggest sending them an email. If you have any troubles with installing the software, you're certainly welcome to email me to ask for questions about installation. I'm just not an expert when it comes to solving installation troubles. That said, once your software is up and running, if you have questions about how to use it or how to create embroidery designs, I am an excellent choice to ask those questions to. And I love to receive questions from people because they let me know what people want to learn, and that's how I know what to include in the classes that I offer. So today where we're going to start is here. Digitizer is made up of 3 programs. We've got Easy Design, we've got Easy Edit, and we've got Design Gallery. And if I was to just minimize my things for a moment here, you'll see on my desktop that I have quick links to them right here. Easy Edit, Design Gallery, and Easy Design. Now, those 3 programs, I just like to quickly describe what their purpose is or what they are. So, first of all, Easy Edit and Easy Design are the kind of 2 sort of functioning programs that you use to either create embroidery or edit it. And then Design Gallery is like a librarian. We use Design Gallery to browse the contents of our computer and find embroidery designs or find artwork that we maybe have lost or don't know quite where it is. And so Easy Design is the most used part of the program. That's probably where I do 99% of my work with the Digitizer program. Easy Edit is that kind of other 1%, and it has some very important uses, some very specific uses, but it's not the core of the program. Now, specifically, the difference between Easy Design and Easy Edit is this. Easy Design is what I would call object-based embroidery. Easy Edit is what I would call stitch-based embroidery. And specifically in Easy Edit, you can do things like edit individual stitches, whether it be insert a stitch, delete a stitch, or move a stitch. It's a very specific thing. Most of those types of edits are done in Easy Design, where we can, and you'll see in today, I'm going to be focusing today on Easy Design. I'll be coming back in another Getting Started class and talking about Easy Edit and editing stitches. But for today, I'm going to deal with what I consider are the most important topics that you need to know over the next hour, the most important things you need to know to get started using your software in Easy Design. And I'll try to explain what I mean when I say object-based embroidery. And I think by the end of the class, when I review, you'll be able to say, okay, I get that, Trevor. Easy Design is where you make embroidery objects. And those objects create the stitches. Now, all of that said, I'm going to start with Design Gallery, because with Design Gallery, you can browse your computer. Now, let me get my design software up here. So here's my Digitizer software. This is Easy Design. And right here, you have a quick link to start up your Design Gallery. And when I just start up my Design Gallery, it looks like this. It's another individual window. So it's a different program. Remember I said that? So back here I have my Design Digitizer Easy Design. Then in front here I can just see I can move it up. This is Design Gallery. Now, Design Gallery kind of has 2 sides. There's a left and a right. On the left, basically you have the contents of your computer. You can use this to specifically browse whether it be your hard drive or a DVD or a CD drive or a USB memory stick, whatever you've got, and you want to see what's on it. Now, here at the top you'll see it says All Files, right here where I'm mousing right now, All Files. If I click on this arrow to open that up, you'll see that I can limit. So right now it's showing me all files. It'll show me anything that's in a folder, whether it's embroidery or not. But I could specifically say to just show me, embroidery files, or just show me image files, or just show me files of a specific format, only show me Jeff files, or only show me Jan files, or whatever sort of format that you choose. So this is your ability to limit. I guess let's say you have a folder that has a set of designs and they're in multiple formats, but you just want to see a specific format, Jeff or so, or whatever other format. You could choose that and limit. So if I choose Jeff, notice what happens. There's only one design. So the folder that I'm looking at, which it tells me here, I'm looking at my C drive / embroidery album version 4. It's right here, embroidery album version 4. I could click on it, and that's what it does. If I click on, I made this myself. I have embroidery album version 3. This is the designs that came with version 3. See, it's not showing me any designs because there's no Jeff files in that format. There's other files. If I make this back to all files, it'll show me everything that's in that folder, not just the Jeff files. And so that's the difference. So when you use Design Gallery, probably the easiest thing is just to leave it set for all files, unless you need to specifically filter down to just show you your Jeff format or whatever format you want. And you can use here to just simply click on a folder. And so if I click on Embroidery Album version 4, it's going to show me they're more or less the same designs that were in version 3. These are the designs, if you don't know, on your computer C drive. When you install Digitizer software, a folder gets installed called Embroidery Album. And inside of that folder are these designs. And so those are designs that we should all have, and that's convenient for me for training purposes, because I can then open up designs and know with all confidence that you should also have those designs. Anyway, all of that said, I'm going to select a design by simply clicking on it. And probably the easiest thing I might want to do would be to simply open this design to use it. And so I'm not going to go into all of the features today of Design Gallery, and my goal is not to try and show you every specific thing about any one part. It's to highlight the things that I think you need to know the most. So all of that said, you open up your Design Gallery, you click on a folder, you find the design you want, and then you click on it. You can see the design. I'm going to right-click on this design, which opens up a little menu, gives me an option to open with Janome Digitizer, and so I'll choose that. And what happens is the design that I chose, this beach scene, is now going to open as a design in my Digitizer MBX software. And so here you have Digitizer MBX software. Now, next topic. I always like to come back to my slides. This is how I know what time to mark in my class review so that people can sometimes want to review just a specific topic. So that I always come back to my title slide when I start a new topic. So now we're going to talk about easy design, and the first thing I want to do is just give a quick overview of the workspace. Because if you've never used embroidery software and you're a little bit new to computers in general, and you install the software and you open it up, you'll see that there are a lot of buttons, and a lot of them are specific to embroidery software, and you may not immediately know what they're for. And so I find that a good thing to do is just a little bit of a review of what we see on our workspace. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is that your workspace may look different from mine, and that's because the workspace is completely customizable. In other words, I got to choose where I had my menus. And so as I review the workspace, if yours doesn't look exactly the same as mine, that's okay. It's a user preference. It's one of the really great things. Now, I know a lot of my students may set their workspace up very similar to the way I set mine up just for convenience sake because it makes it easy for them. But the truth is they're all individual tools and toolbars, and you can put them where you want them. Just as an example, down here at the bottom, you can see my color palette is shown along the bottom of my workspace. And to the very left of it, right beside this red color, there's a little tiny dotted line. I can't really zoom in on it for you, but you'll see it when you look closely on your screen. Those little dotted lines, that's the handle of this toolbar. And if I grab on the handle of this toolbar, I can actually take it and drag it off my workspace, and now it's like it's a floating toolbar. See, it's just on top. Now I've moved it and I've put it above my workspace. See what happens? So I'll just do that again. Grab it, take it off, put it in the middle. It's floating. It's the color palette. By the way, if I click close, it'll just go away. It's like I lost the toolbar. But that's no big deal. First of all, there is a tool right here for the color palette, which I can simply click on to turn it back on. But not all the toolbars have a little button like that. Another option would be to right-click over top of an empty space on your workspace, and it shows you all of the toolbars, and it shows you the ones that are or are not turned on. You see, I can see color palette does not have a check mark beside it, which means it's not turned on. And if I click on it here, it turns it back on. If I right-click over top of my workspace again, I don't have the alignment bar turned on. That's another toolbar I could turn on. If I right-click, I've got a machine status bar. I don't have that turned on. So these are all toolbars, tools that I'm not using. Currently, I don't have any embroidery machines directly connected to my machine, and so therefore I don't need the machine status bar, so I've just decided to have it closed. I don't need it. I'm not using the alignment tools right now, and I don't have available space on my workspace where I want to put them, so I close them. It's up to you. You decide what you want and where you want it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and put my color palette. Watch what happens. When I drag the color palette over one of the toolbars, tool spaces, it'll snap to place. If I don't want it there, I can put it down here. So you decide where these toolbars go. And that's why my space may look different from yours. Now, let's start at the top. I have drop-down menus, File, Edit, Machine, External Media, View. And most of the tools that are found in the drop-down menus have buttons for them. In other words, a lot of the functions in Digitizer software, there's more than one way to get at it. So you have your embroidery drop-down menu, image, setup, window. I'll talk about a couple of the things in those drop-down menus today. Up at the top, here at the very first menu that I've got is my switch to graphics mode. If you have Digitizer MBX, you'll have the built-in Corel Draw software. And in a future Getting Started class, I'll be highlighting just the Corel graphics mode. Today we won't be talking any more about Corel graphics, because you don't have to use it for getting started. That said, it's a very nice addition to version 4, and I love it, so I will be talking about it more. Now the next button here, that's gray. Notice that it's gray. Whenever a toolbar is gray, it means you have to do something first before you can use it. In this case, it's switch to graphics mode, and then of course if I was in graphics mode, this button would be switch back to embroidery mode. So that's the two different sort of modes. I'll do it. Just switch over to graphics mode just for one moment. It takes me from the digitizing embroidery mode, and it basically switches over to using the Corel graphics mode. So it just takes a moment to make that switch, since it goes a little faster the second time, but I haven't started it yet today. So once that comes up, you'll see that now I'm in the Corel graphics mode, and now my option is going to be switch back to embroidery mode. Now, while I'm here, I'll just highlight, see the embroidery design I had opened? It shows on my screen so that I know where those, I guess, stitches are while I'm working at, with vectors and graphics. Anyway, like I said, we're not going to touch on graphics today, and I'm going to go back now to switch back to embroidery mode. So I have the ability to switch back and forth between graphics and embroidery mode. Now that's the next toolbar right here. This is kind of your standard Windows, new, open, save, save as, print, print preview. This is cut, copy, and paste. Now, this is important. This is how you select your embroidery machine, and you can select from the MC 12,000, 11,000, 10,001, 9,500, 350E, whatever you've got. If it's a Janome machine, it should be listed here. And if not, you choose Other. And that's for all other brands of embroidery machines. So you can choose Other, and then you can create your own custom hoop sizes if you want. Following along the toolbar, I've got send this design to the machine or write it onto a card. Basically, that's how I take the design that I've prepared and send it over to my embroidery machine. I'm not direct connected to my machine. I just use a card myself. Like I showed before, this is the switch to go to Design Gallery to open up more designs. Undo and redo. That's if you don't like the last step you did, you can undo it. This is a switch to using Easy Edit. So if we were going to do some editing on stitches, we could switch over to the Easy Edit mode. This is an image preparation toolbar here. I'll talk a little bit about image preparation towards the end of today's class. This is the next toolbar down is kind of a viewing toolbar. Zoom in, zoom out, tells you what percentage I'm zoomed in. And then these are like on-off buttons. Display stitches, off and on. This is the visualizer or the 3D mode. Turn that off and you get kind of like more computer-generated lines. And when you turn it on, it gives you that realistic sort of thread look. This would be display images on, off. This is for display vectors on, off. This is for display your grid. See the grid in the background, on, off. Applique fabric, hoop, display your hoop. So I'm going to zoom out. You can see I have an embroidery hoop on my screen. I've chosen the MC11000 and the ST hoop. If you wanted to, you could switch to the 12,000 and choose the big GR hoop and have lots of workspace available. Big 230 by 300 millimeter embroidery hoop. If I didn't want to see the embroidery hoop, I can just click on this and it hides the hoop. So that's what these are viewing toolbars. To the left here, well, we've got right now I'm working in metric. If you prefer to work in inches, you can switch to inches, just as easy as that. And once I make that change, all of the numbers on all of the toolbars switch to inches and decimals versus metric where you're dealing with sort of millimeters. This here is a traveling toolbar, and there's many very specific uses for it. It's not something that I'll probably work with today, but basically you can move by object or by color or to the start end of the design. It's a way that you can check your designs, and you have sort of the ability to go backwards and forwards. So this is a traveling toolbar. And here we have a slow redraw button, very helpful for, I guess, proofing your work before you get started. And here I've got turn on and off this is the resequence toolbar, and that's, I guess I can turn that on and off with this button. And remember that was the color palette on, off. And this is for my embroidery gallery, which is a set of embroidery motifs which you can use to interact with your designs. You can actually create your own motifs. So those are those three tools there. Now, below that we've got a lettering toolbar, and this whole toolbar specifically deals with creating lettering. And I won't be talking about lettering in today's class, but in the next class, Getting Started number 2, I'll be moving on to lettering. So that's the lettering toolbar. And then beside it here, I have another toolbar. This is the layout toolbar, and you can use this to copy items to your corners or to a circle. And these are some of the tools that I used to love in my customizer software, and they're now available as part of the Digitizer software. Now, here on the left, this toolbar is what I like to call the Create Something toolbar. These are the tools that we use to create embroidery. And I'll be going through most of this toolbar over the next several minutes of class today. So I will talk about all of these tools. Now, below, this is what I like to call your selecting and editing toolbar. You've got selecting tools. We've got the tools for reshaping or choosing your design properties. These are tools for flipping things like mirror imaging, vertical, horizontal, rotate. These are special effects like feathered edge, underlay, gradient spacing, ambience quilting, Florentine effect, outlines and offsets. These are the types of things that I get into on an every class basis with the Digitizer Workshop group. We make designs and we use all of the tools and effects within the software. Next to that, we have some editing tools like cut holes, fill holes, removing overlaps, split blocks. Here we've got backtrack and repeat, and this is a tool for tie-off and tie-ins. This is a break-apart tool. Next to that, I've got a tool for using combine mode. This is your ability to create basically any size of embroidery with any embroidery hoop. And you can add as many different hoopings to your layout as needed to create. If you want to go to the Guinness Book of World Records for the world's largest embroidery, these are the tools you're going to use to make absolutely any size of embroidery, and helps you, I guess, to align all of the designs that you're going to sew out to create that large embroidery project. Now, a little bit more to show down at the bottom. Well, I guess I have my color palette that I have set in here. And right now I have my color palette specifically set for Janome colors, but I can talk a little bit about how you can customize that. And down below that I have a bit of an information bar. It tells me the current number of stitches in the design, the size and width and height, it tells me the color that I'm currently working with or what I'm set to do next, tells me that I'm set for the fabric type of pure cotton, and we'll talk about how that relates, I guess, to our designs. And at the very bottom is an empty bar, and that's the prompt bar. That bar will tell you how to use certain tools. Okay, so now I'm just going to flip my page and check my notes. That's a bit of an overview of the workspace for easy design. And before I move on, maybe I'll just look at a couple things in some of the drop-down menus. I said earlier I would tell you how to find out what version you have. Well, under the Help drop-down menu, there's lots of very valuable things. First of all, you have the ability to open up an on-screen manual and an on-screen workbook. And those are things that they may not be the easiest reading to go through from cover to cover, but when you're specifically looking for an answer about something specific, this is where I would go, the on-screen manual or the on-screen help. Basically, it brings up this kind of a help situation where you can browse through the topics or you can search for a word and it'll bring you, it's basically a digital copy of your printed manuals, and you can find specific topics and it just helps. So there's lots of valuable information found there. Also under your help menu, you've got the About Digitizer, and this is where you can find out exactly what version you have. I'm using version 4.0K, which was released December 2011. And when Janome has a new update available, then you'll say, oh, I have version K, and now they have version L or M or whatever's next, and you'll download that and install it. So that's how you'll know what version you have. About Digitizer MBX, and it'll tell you right there exactly what version you have. One more thing I'll highlight, and that's under the Setup menu. Here we have several things that are valuable. For example, I'd said about the thread colors. Mine are set for the Janome colors. You could come into the thread colors here and customize. Your thread chart could be set to be from any number of different brands of thread. So if you use Madeira thread or you use Robison Anton thread, then you can choose the Robison Anton Super Strength Rayon color palette. And right now I have 78 colors in my color palette, and they're all Janome colors. If I want, I can say match and replace all, and it'll match Robison Anton colors to these Janome colors and replace them. And so basically now all of my color codes come up with the Robison Anton colors versus the Janome colors. It really depends on what thread brand you like to use. Also on that Setup menu, we've got the Work Environment, and that's something that's worth looking at. So in your work environment, it opens up this small window that has several little tabs. And the first tab is the Display tab. You can set the size of your grid. You can set some of the colors for like the inside of your hoop or the outside of your hoop. You can actually create your own custom hoop sizes in here. So if you don't have a Janome machine and you want to set up your own hoops, you can create your own hoop sizes. What I like to do in here is just check the Auto Save tab. that it's checked and turned on, and I have mine set for every 10 minutes, and that's a good thing. You see, if you're digitizing and suddenly the power goes out in your house, you might actually lose some of your work. But if you have your software set to auto back up every 10 minutes, the worst you'd ever lose would be the last 10 minutes of work that you'd done. So that to me is an important thing to highlight in the sort of overview of the workspace. Okay, so all of that said, that's easy design. Now, this is where I want to go next, how it works. Let's just understand how the software works. So what I'm going to do, I still have my design gallery open. I'll browse through the contents of this folder until I find the design of the little love owls. Here they are here. And I'm going to open up the love owls. So I'll just, again, I selected it. I'm going to right-click and say open it up with Janome Digitizer. And that design then opens up on my screen. And what you'll see is that, so here's the embroidery design that I've opened up. And looking over here on the right-hand side, you can see all of the parts of that design. This is the resequencing toolbar. I have the ability to see it listed by colors. So it shows me the colors of the design. It shows the light brown, then some dark brown, then I guess a reddy brown, back to dark brown, back to beige, back to dark brown, then white, then black, then white, then beige, then dark brown, then white. Lots of color choices for this design. So that's the resequencing toolbar. It allows me to see the exact color sequence of the design. If I click on the button to show objects, it shows me specifically each object, so I can see the very first object of the design is this outer circle. And I can see what kind of object it was made with and what type of stitch it is and the number of stitches. There's a little button here. You can make this less, kind of takes less room, and it shows a little less of the details or more. Now, I'd said easy design is what I call object-based embroidery. And what I mean by that is we don't digitize stitches. Remember I showed you the photograph of me straddled up to a board, drawing lines on a piece of paper and literally digitizing every stitch of the design? Well, that's not how it works anymore. We do today what I call on-screen digitizing, which means we create the design on our computer screen. We've got all sorts of tools to use to create embroidery designs, and it could be as simple as this. I'm just going to grab a circle tool, left-click, and drag, and let go, and I've created a circle. If I look closely, that circle has stitches. So I didn't create the stitches, I created the circle. The circle has stitches. Now, the software creates the stitches, and the software creates the stitches based upon what I call the object details. And just as an example, I'm going to grab, this here is my select tool, right here, little magic pointing finger. And when I click on it, it automatically selected the last object that I made, which was the circle. See? And I can tell it's selected because it's got a little box around it with black handles. When it's selected, I could do all sorts of things. I could click on the object and drag and move it to a new position. So all I did was click and drag and let go to move it. If I want to select a different object, I click on that object. So here I just clicked on this circle, the first object of this design, and I could click and move that object if I want. So the software, you select an object with the selecting tool. Now, the software makes the stitches based upon the object details. Now, down here on the, remember I said this is sort of your selecting and editing toolbar? Well, beside the select tool, this tool here is called object details, and I'm going to turn that on now. And here I get a very important box that has all sorts of tabs. I'll just move it over here. The tabs are the line stitch tab, there's a feathering tab, there's an underlay tab. stretchiness, radial fill, dimensions, gradient fill. Those are all different, I guess, settings that we could control for this object, and it's specifically to the object that I have selected. So what that means is, if I select my little circle, I'll just click on it to select it, and then ask for the details. You'll see here that this circle has, I'll move my box over, so there's the circle. This circle has, on the Fill Stitch tab, it's a Weave Fill. That's a type of stitch. There's many different types of stitches we could choose from. If I open this box up, I could choose a blanket stitch, contour, cross stitch, embossed fill, motif fill, satin fill, stipple fill, and weave fill. And we've got it set as a weave fill. Because it's a weave fill, I can choose the weave fill pattern. You'll notice if I change the number, pattern 2, pattern 3, pattern 4, it changes in this box here, shows me kind of how it's going to look. So there's I think there's about 25 different fill patterns to choose from for the weave fill. You get to control the spacing and the length of every stitch. So that's your ability to control spacing, also known as the density, sort of how close together are the rows of stitches, and the stitch length, the distance from one needle penetration to the next needle penetration. So I could choose those. The default was 0.4 and for the density and 4.2 for the stitch length. If I wanted to make this more dense, I could change that to, let's say, 0.3. And I could change the stitch length from, let's say, if I wanted to make it shorter, from 4.2 to, I don't know, 3.5, and say OK. Now, notice, here's my object right here. It says there's 823 stitches in it. If I hit undo, which will undo the step that I just did of changing its details, it used to have 574 stitches in it. Now I'll hit redo, which will apply those setting changes again. It's 823 stitches. So you can see by making those two changes that I was able to make this area have many more stitches. So that's the concept, okay? We create an object, and then the software generates the stitches based upon object details. So for example, if I want to change it from a weave fill to, let's say, an embossed fill, and now all of these choices are different. I get to control, first of all, the pattern. So I choose from a list of dozens and dozens and dozens of different choices of patterns. I'll choose an arrow. I could set the size of the arrow, the spacing of the arrow, the X and Y spacing of the arrow, the rotation of it, and the stitch spacing or the density for this object. And if I look closely now at my arrow, you'll see that there's stitches in the background that make an arrow pattern. So that's the concept of selecting an object, opening up its details, and changing it from a weave fill to an emboss fill. You could do cross stitch. And again, with cross stitch, you have settings that you can control for the cross stitch. So that's the concept. It's object-based embroidery. We make the objects, software makes the stitches based upon the instructions that we get to provide. And that's the core functionality of the software. I don't know if you noticed, when you install the software, it talks about, you have to agree and da-da-da-da-da, and then it shows off a list of patents. Well, all those patents relate to the specific processes that this software has for generating embroidery stitches. And certainly Janome and their partner in software, Wilcom, have been developing software for a very long time, and a very, very, very intelligent software. I won't try and get into it too far today, but just know that there's a lot that happens when you create an embroidery design, and it's done by the software. So that's how it works. And there's other choices. Now, just as an example, if I look at this love owls, you can see here that they've used on the tummy of these two owls embossed fill patterns. And it looks like they're two different different patterns for the girl and the guy, got different patterns. And you can, of course, go in and select that object and come in and, well, first of all, you can see what pattern they used, spades, and it's at this size. And if I wanted to, I could make the size of it bigger or the space of it bigger. I could change the spacing. So, for example, it's set for 5 millimeters with 5 millimeter spacing. If I change the spacing to 6 millimeters and say OK, see that? It puts just a little bit of more distance between each one of the little motifs that are in that embossed pattern. So that's how it works. We create objects. We don't always create the objects. I'm going to show you before we get too far along about automatic digitizing. And when you automatically digitize something, the software makes the objects, but they're still objects, and you still have full control over them, select them, modify them, edit them, the stitches, and another object setting. Take a look at this eyelid here. Is this eyelid? I'm just going to move it over and take a good close look. I'm going to turn that 3D stitching off. Now we can see the stitches that are underneath. See, this object has an edge underlay and a zigzag underlay. Underlay are the stitches that are sewn first to support the stitching that comes on top. And they're very important stitches. Now, you can see here the underlay stitches. If I go to the object details for this eyelid, there's a tab for underlay, and I can see that it's set to have an edge run plus a zigzag. If I wanted to, I could change that to be, I could go to be just an edge run only. Takes away the zigzag. Or I could say, you know what, I want more underlay. I want to have an edge run, and I want to have a double zigzag. And I get even more underlay. So that's a topic that comes up in almost every single Digitizer workshop class, underlay, because they're really the most important stitches of your embroidery design. If you've ever been, and if you're like me, and you go down to the shopping store, and you're in, whatever, Walmart, and you're looking at the embroidered garments, if you're like me, you evaluate it. Oh, did they do a good job? Does it look good? And sometimes the answer is, well, no. And sometimes the answer is yes. And you see this embroidery that just looks so beautiful, and yet it sits up on the garment, and it doesn't sink into the garment. It just looks so nice sitting on top, yet it's still soft and supple and flows with the garment. And that's because of the ability to create underlay. Underlay are the supporting stitches that we use to basically ensure that the embroidery looks nice when sewn. If you didn't have objects with underlay, the embroidery stitches would lay flat and they would sink down and into your fabric. So they're very important stitches, and it's one of the most powerful features when you study the Janome Digitizer software. Its ability to control underlay is probably the best you'll find in embroidery software. Now, so that's how it works, object-based embroidery. And that's the general concept, is we create objects and then we choose the object settings, and that's what the software makes. And every time we adjust those settings, it'll adjust the number of stitches in your design. Now, the next topic that I want to talk about is just to review what I call the most important tools. We're going to talk about all of these tools here. We'll talk about the selecting tool, we'll talk about the reshape tool, we'll talk about object properties more, and we'll talk about creating objects with the digitizing hands-on tools. So that's the next step for us, is just to learn about the core, the most important tools. That's what this is about. So maybe what I'll do is just start a new design. See here, I just hit new. And it just opens up a new workspace that's empty. Now, that said, if I look here under the window drop-down menu, see, there's the love owls. They're still open. I didn't close it. There's the beach scene, still open. I didn't close it. Still got my email address up here too. If you want to close the design, you need to come here. Not the big red X. That's going to close Digitizer software. The one below it. That will close this design. Do I want to save the changes to Design 6? No, you already wrote down my email address, trevor@sunsetstitches.com. I don't need to save this design. I say no, and it closes the design. So it's no longer open. So that's how you can see how many designs you have open. So I have beach, love owls, and now I have design 7, which is an empty design. So what we're going to do, we'll start with the rectangle tool. Here it is here. I'm just going to click on it. And the first thing I want to show you is most of the tools over here on the left have a little tiny triangle beside them. And if I click on the tool and hold, the toolbar flies open. And here I can see I can make a rectangular tool with a satin fill, with a weave fill, with an embossed fill, with motif fill, with contour fill, with radial fill, with cross stitch, and with stippling. All different types of stitches. The tool is the rectangle tool, and I'll just leave it on rectangular weave fill, and basically it works like this. Left click and drag and let go to make a rectangle. It's as easy as that. Watch. The tool's turned on. Notice down at the bottom it says, this is the prompt bar, enter rectangle origin. Sort of says, where do you want to start? So you click and you drag, enter, it says enter rectangle corner. And what I do is I just draw the shape of the rectangle. So see, I've made 2 objects. Remember, this is my select tool. And with my select tool, I can click on an object to select it. I could also click and drag a box around both of these rectangles to select both of them. Now I can modify both of them at the same time. I can move them both at the same time. I could open up their details and modify the type of stitch of both of them at the same time. See? So you can select one object or multiple objects by, well, there's many ways to select, but the easiest way is going to be to click and drag a box around the entire object. It only selects the object if it's entirely surrounded by the box. In other words, if I click and drag and I get the top rectangle and I only get half of the bottom rectangle and let go, it'll only select the one that was fully surrounded by that rectangle. Now, something else about the select tool, notice when I selected it, we get handles around it, corner handles and side handles. Those handles can be used to transform the shape. In other words, if I grab on a corner handle, I can click and drag to make it smaller or larger. And when I go with a corner handle, it will keep the shape in proportion. Will not change the shape of the rectangle, just the overall size. Now that's as opposed to the center handles, which will stretch the shape taller or skinnier, not maintaining the proportion. So I can stretch it longer, but if I use the corner handle, I change it in proportion. So those are the transform handles. And remember, if I click on an object, I get those handles to resize or stretch. Now, if I click on an object, I get solid handles. But watch what happens if I click again. The handles turn open. I'll make a small object here and then zoom in on it so you can see them a little bit better. So there's the object. Their handles are solid. If I click again on the object, they turn open. Click again, solid. Open and solid. 2 different ways to transform the object. So if I click on it again, when they're open, I can rotate my object. And I can rotate by any angle, any number of degrees. And this little point here in the middle is the point that we rotate around. So if I want to rotate around that point there, I can move it there and then rotate around specifically that place. So that's how, and again, click on it again, solid handles for resizing. Click on it again, open handles for rotating. The other open handle in the center is going to be for sort of like slanting. See, I can slant the object. So it's like italicizing. Solid handles for resize, open handles for rotate. So that's the 2 this is one of the most fundamental parts of the design, is being able to click on an object, select it, change its size, stretch it, reshape it, rotate it, all done with the Select Object tool. Now, I'm going to select this one and take it back to the Weave Fill for a moment. So I'll change it back to, let's say, a Weave Fill. And I'm going to zoom in on it. I'll make it a little bit smaller and zoom in. Okay, there's my object. Now, this is what I wanted to show you next. The Reshape tool. When I click on Reshape, it's changed. You see, I go back to Select. I've got those handles. I'll just turn the visualizer off for a minute. See? So you can see the handles. If I click on Reshape, now the handles are a little bit different. There's three things here. There's what I call the nodes, which are the points that are used to create the shape. Right here on the corner of the shape, there's a node, and I can click on it and move it. See, it's no longer a perfect rectangle because I moved one shape point. Call them nodes. You can move them. If you click on the shape, it'll add a new one. So I can add a new point. So I started with a rectangle, but now I've created whatever kind of shape that is. So those are the shape points. You also have the angle line. Notice right here there's a line, and that is the stitch angle. And I can use this to change the angle of the stitches. See that? The stitches go to whatever angle I put this line on. So you can change any stitch angle. The third thing in Reshape is the starting point and the exit point. Those are the points that you use to choose where will this object start sewing. Put it down here, it'll start sewing there. See that? There's the trail thread from, I guess this is the first part of our design. So right from the center of the hoop, it jumps to the start of the design. This is where it finishes sewing, and then you can see it jumps down to my next object. So this is the exit point. If I move the exit point to, let's say, here, changes where the object finishes sewing, move it up here, changes it again. So you get to choose the entry point and the exit point for every object, as well as the angle line, and of course you can change the shape of the object. All of that with the Reshape tool. So if I choose the rectangle tool and choose a satin rectangle and draw a long satin rectangle like this, then I can zoom in on it and select it and choose Reshape and decide that I'd like to have the stitch angle at, let's say, 90, and I want it to start sewing here and finish sewing there. If I want it to finish sewing over here, I can move it to there. That's kind of how it works. Those are very important functions to understand. So that's the rectangle tool, and again, you click on it, you left click and drag and let go, makes the object. Notice I've made all these rectangles. The first one is a weave fill. You can kind of see the stitch type. The second one is a cross stitch fill. The third one and fourth one are satin fills, and you can see that here in the sequence bar. Now let's try the circle tool. So if I click on the circle tool, left click and drag and let go, it makes the circle. Basically you start, the first point you put in is the center of the circle. So if I get in here and start right on the center of this grid sort of square, when I drag, you'll see that it makes the circle around that point. And when I stop or let go, that's where it makes the circle. Now, notice where I let go is where the circle, it starts and stops directly across from each other. So, for example, if I click the circle tool and I start here and then I drag down and I end here, see, it finishes sewing there, it starts sewing across from it. So it always sews to the place where you kind of determine the finishing point by clicking and dragging, and wherever if I put it at the, let's say, the top, it will start at the bottom and finish at the top. Now, if I choose the Reshape tool, so I'll select this circle, choose Reshape. Here I have the start point. I can't fix the exit point. It's always by default opposite the start point. If I move the start point over here, it'll change the exit point over here, and it changes the stitch angle. It's not like the rectangle where I get to choose the stitch angle. When you use the circle tool, it's specifically done to go perpendicular to the start point and the end point. So if I put the start point here, it'll finish there, and the angle would be 90 degrees of that. I can use, there is a shape point, which I can use to change the circle to make it more or less, I guess, ellipse, or shorter and taller. But I can't choose to move the start point or sorry, the exit point. The exit point will always be the opposite from my start point. So that's the circle tool. So circle tool, rectangle tool, very easy to use. The trouble is most designs require other shapes, not circles and squares. So that's where we get into the other tools. Now, these two tools here are the tools that I use to fill something in with thread. Down here we've got the sort of outlining tools, the single run line and the bordering tools. So these tools are more used for, I guess, lines and outlines. These tools up here are used to fill things in. This tool here is the next tool we'll look at. It's called Parallel Fill. And again, if I click and hold, shows me Parallel Satin Fill, Parallel Weave Fill, Parallel Embossed Fill, Parallel Motive Fill, Radial Fill, Contour Fill, Cross Stitch, and Stipple. Different types of the stitches. But remember, you can always change this, right? Once we make the object, you still have the ability to go in and say, I chose Parallel Weave Fill, but I really meant Satin Fill. You can always select it and use the object details to change that. So let's just choose a Parallel Weave Fill. And I'm going to zoom in on a spot on my workspace down here. Now, I call this tool right here, it's called Parallel Fill, I call it the Outline tool. And this is why. Look down at the bottom. It says, digitize the free outline using left/right clicks, brackets, corner/curve. Well, basically what that says is digitize the outline. And I click, 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 click as many times as I want. I'm drawing the outline of the shape. I don't have to close the shape. In other words, see here, there's the last point that I put in. If I want, I can use backspace on my keyboard to delete points one at a time and say, oh, I meant them to go here, here, and here. But whenever I stop, when I hit enter, it will close the shape from the last point to the first point. So watch, I'll hit enter, closes the shape, fills it in with thread. Simple as that. You draw the shape, choose the tool, draw the shape, hit enter, fills it in with thread. Select. Select this shape, choose reshape. Here you can see all of the points that I use to make the shape. I can move them. I could click on the outline to add new ones. I get to change the stitch angle. I get to choose the entry point. I get to choose the exit point. That's how it works. You choose start point, exit point, stitch angle. You can change the shape nodes. Remember that it said when we first started it, the tool, I'll choose it again, it says digitize the free outline using left/right clicks, brackets, corner/curve. All right. Corner, left clicks for corner, right clicks for curves. In other words, if I left click, I get corners or what I call straight lines. If I right click, I get rounded lines. When I hit enter, fills it in with thread. So it's left click for corners, right click for curves, and you draw the shape. So if I want, I can draw, let's see, a parallel satin fill, left click, left click, left click, left click, enter. Choose reshape, choose the stitch angle, choose the entry point, choose your exit point. Pretty much as easy as that. So you choose the type of stitch. Now remember, I'd said if I didn't want, chose satin fill, but maybe I didn't want a satin fill. I can still choose weave fill. Okay, so if you don't start with the right stitch type, no big deal. It just makes it faster. If you know that you want to create a satin fill, you could create a satin fill without having to go back. Satin fill basically means that the stitches are on the outer edges and it's left open in the middle versus the weave fill where the software puts all the stitching through the center. So that's the difference in the types of stitches. Okay, now looking at my time, it's already 2:19 in Saskatoon here, and as sort of typical for me. It looks like I'll probably go longer than 90 minutes, but I hope that's okay. And if not, if you get sitting too long, go ahead and stretch your arms. Everybody's going to get a copy of the recording of today's class to review as many times as you need. But there's still a couple more really important tools that I want to talk about. So that first tool was the outline tool, also known as parallel fill. And by the way, parallel fill because everything is at one stitch angle, right? When I choose reshape, I can change the stitch angle with this angle line, but it's all at one angle. The whole thread coming through the shape is at one angle. That's why it's called parallel fill. The other tool I want to talk about is called turning angle fill. And again, click and hold, turning angle satin fill, turning angle weave fill, turning angle motif fill, turning angle contour fill, and turning angle radial fill. So I'm going to go with turning angle satin fill. I'll start right here and show that, first of all, I call this the 2-point method. Remember, parallel fill is the outline method. This one is the 2-point method, and it works like this. You have to put in sets of points. 1, 2. That becomes a stitch angle. Now it comes back to side 1 and allows me to move along, and I can say 1, 2. And it's going to hit enter. So you'll see what happened is that the thread sews from angle 1 to angle 2, and it evenly distributes the stitches to turn from the first stitch angle to the second. If I select the object and choose reshape, I can choose, first of all, the starting point and the exit point. But the stitch angles are determined by the angle lines that we put in with the points that we insert. So if I want to use the 2-point tool, I can do something like this. Look, 1, 2, and then coming over here, 1, 2, and then coming down here, 1, 2. So now the stitches turn around a corner from the first angle to the second angle to the third angle. So that's the real difference between the tools. You can basically create the same shapes. I could create the same shape. For example, if I choose the parallel satin fill tool, I'm going to make a circle. And the easiest way to make a circle, this is something you don't necessarily need to know this to get started, but if you use the control key on your keyboard, it will help you to, basically what it does is forces your points to be to specific degree. So watch what happens. I'm just going to hold control down on my keyboard, and I'm going to click once, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to right click, and see it makes that circle. And when I hit enter, it creates a circle. So to create a circle with the parallel fill tool, simply hold the right click down, hold the control key down and right click 1, 2, 3 times, and you get a circle. So I can create a circle using the parallel weave fill. I could create the same circle using turning angle satin fill. The only difference is I have to do this. 1, 2, that's a stitch angle. Now, right click, and then right click, right click. So I created pretty much the same shape. This time I created it using the outline tool. This time I created it using the 2-point tool, also known as turning angle versus parallel. So that's important to know. So for example, I could create a corner, like a satin stitch corner, with the parallel thread tool, and it would look like this. The stitches are all one angle. It could be on any angle, but they're all on one angle. Same corner with the 2-point tool, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. See? There's the difference. Same shape, 2 different tools. Parallel thread, turning angle thread. Something I haven't shown you yet is the cut hole tool. Where's a nice big piece of fill? Here. Big piece of fill here. Here we have something called cut holes. If I turn it on, it tells me at the bottom, enter point 1 of hole 1. So, okay, I'll draw a hole. 1, 2, 3 points to a hole, hit enter again. It cuts a hole out of my fill. You see that? I select it again. I'm going to choose the cut hole tool again. It says enter point 1 of hole 2. You can have as many holes as you want. This time I'll go right click, right click, right click, enter, left click, left click, left click, left click, left click, left click, enter. And it keeps asking me for holes, so now it's hole 4, hole 5. As soon as you hit enter like 2 times in a row, it cuts the holes out. So the first time you hit enter, it says I'm finished with this hole, and allows you to start another hole. And if you don't start another hole and you hit enter twice, it cuts holes out. So the concept is you can select a shape. So I'll choose my selecting tool, click on a shape, choose the cut hole tool. I'm just going to zoom in. 1, 2, 3, hit enter. 1, 2, 3, hit enter, and then hit enter again. Cuts those holes out of the shape. So that's the cut hole tool. And just similarly, we've got a fill hole tool. So if I don't want those holes, I decided I didn't want them, fill the holes back in again. So if I take, for example, one of these circles that I used the parallel fill tool to make, and I cut a hole out of it, so I'll choose to cut a hole, and I'll go round, 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 enter, kind of basically creates the letter O in parallel thread. I could create the exact same shape with turning angle thread, and I would need to go, in this case, I might say to myself, inside, outside. And then I'm right-clicking, inside, outside, and again, inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside. Hit enter. See, so I have more or less the same shape. This time it was parallel thread. This time it was turning angle thread. So that's how it works. Those are the 2 main tools that we use to fill things in with thread. You need to understand those tools to be able to create your own shapes and to be able to decide what stitch angle your shapes will be. Now, the other 2 tools get a little bit simpler. We've got a run line tool and we've got a border tool. In actual essence, they're the same tool, and I'll show you why. Remember that if I click and hold, we've got the run line, I've got a single run line, I've got a triple run line, I have a sculpture run line, motif run line, candle wicking line, backstitch line, and stem stitch line. All different types of lines. I'm just going to choose the single run line. Now, imagine that now my sewing machine is going to go forward, 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 just like the straight stitch on a sewing machine, and I can just simply left click to draw a line, and when I hit enter, the stitches just sew forward, 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 just like your sewing machine. It follows the line that I made. And I have a line tool that has all those different line choices. And again, if you selected this line object and then asked for its details, now the options box shows, well, there's no underlay tab. We don't put underlay underneath line stitches. It doesn't come up. It's not appropriate. It doesn't apply. What does apply is the type of stitch. Right now it's a single run line, and I could choose the stitch length. Or I could change that to be, let's say, a backstitch line. And I get to choose stitch length, thickness, and overlap. And it'll change the look of my line. So there's all different styles. Just like there were different styles of fill stitches, we've got different styles of run stitches, candle wicking. So the idea is you choose the tool. So let's say we know we want to make a candle wicking line. Choose candle wicking, put in 2 points. It puts those candle wicks along your line. And you can again use left clicks for corner points and right clicks for rounded points. And when you hit enter, it fills that shape in with thread. Now, we have the open line tool. We also have the closed line tool. It's the same tool. Just as an example, I'll just choose the single run line and draw a triangle and hit enter. And you can see it starts here and it finishes here. If I choose, that's with the open run line. If I use closed run line and draw the same 1, 2, 3 points and hit enter, it'll automatically close my shape. It's the same tool, just either open or closed. So if you know you're making something that needs to be closed, like a complete shape, you can use this. Otherwise, I suggest using the open shape. Now, I said these tools were the same. The satin line tool works pretty much the same way. click, draw a line, hit enter, and it fills it in with thread. But instead of filling it in with a run stitch, it creates a satin column. Really not entirely different from any other satin column that I could have created with the 2-point tool, or I could make a satin column with the rectangle tool. Okay, other than with the rectangle tool, I might want to change the stitch angle. But the concept is they're all satin lines. They're all satin columns. It's what tool did you use to make it? Now, in this case, I said the line tool. So this satin line, if I draw a satin line, just putting in 2 points, it's a satin line. I can select that satin line and go to its object details, and it's a satin line, but I could change it to be a backstitch line. Now it's a backstitch line. And now if I look at the object details, just the line stitches. So you can go between satin lines and backstitch lines or run stitch lines. The idea is this tool, you draw the center line, and the stitches are made to be an equal distance from your center line. When you go into the object details, one of the settings is for the width. So if you want it wider, 3 millimeters, say OK. See, made it wider. Click and drag, makes it wider. So those are the core tools. Okay, the most important tools. You need to be able to do this, a bunch of doodling. And you need to try each of these tools, and you need to find out what you do and don't understand about them. And that's what you need to be asking me. Trevor, I tried to use this tool and I can't. I think I'm doing it wrong. What did I do wrong? Come back and watch this segment of the video again and learn to use. This is your first project from me. I want you to try all of these tools, and I want you to be able to use them with confidence to draw whatever shape you would like to draw. You need to be able to use the select tool to select an object, to be able to move it, to be able to resize it, to be able to stretch it, clicking again to be able to rotate it. Okay, you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to select an object. You need to be able to open up that object details. You need to be able to change the type of stitch. You need to be able to select an object and choose the Reshape tab and go in and be able to change the stitch angle or change the start point or the exit point. Remember, the starting point is determined by the little green diamond, and the exit point is determined by the little red cross. That's what they are. Start point here, start here, end here, so on this angle. You can learn to use the cut hole tool or the fill hole tool to select an object and fill those holes in. So those are the core tools that you need to be able to use to be able to do a good job and fully understand how the software works. Everything past this point will build upon that core knowledge. And if you're not clear on that, everything that I just showed in the last really 30 minutes, you need to be clear on that. And that's going to help you with everything else that you learn is going to build upon that knowledge. After that, there's lots of techniques we can learn. There's lots of specifics that we can learn about why do we choose certain densities or why do we choose certain underlays. But you need to understand how to make objects, how to select them and modify them. So that's my segment on the most important tools and how to use them. Now, just going to check my notes, make sure that I didn't forget anything. We're going to do one more segment. So, okay, I said I was going to go 90 minutes, but I'm going to take it one step further just to give you a little bit more to play with for today's lessons. And what we're going to talk about is automatic digitizing. Now, I won't have time to go through everything you need to know or could possibly know about automatic digitizing. There's a lot, but I'm going to show you how to get started. So we'll talk about automatic digitizing, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to save this design, okay? I'm going to hit File, and I'm going to hit Save As, and I'm going to choose where to save it. Well, I don't want to save it in my embroidery album. That's the stuff that I know came with the software. I've got a folder for Digitalk, and I've got all sorts of folders for the different classes that I've made, and I've got a folder for today's class, Getting Started, and it's Getting Started. Double-click to open it. And the class is number 1. And right in here, I'm just going to call it getting started number 1, shapes, and I've already made one, I'll make another one. Shapes dash class. This is the one I made in class. I'll send you this design. When I send the class download, everybody's going to get a copy of this. This file will be included. And what I want to know is there any shapes in here that you can or can't make? I want you to try using all of these tools. Take this very seriously. These are the most important tools to understand. Once you understand them, everything else is easy. And I'm trying to break this down into very simple parts for you. So learn to use your select tool, your reshape tool, learn to apply object details, and learn to use all of the most important tools that are used to create shapes. All right, now we go on to start a new design, and the next step is going to be this. There's a drop-down tool here called Image. I click on it, it opens up, and I'm going to choose, Insert Image. So just simply Image and Insert Image. And a box comes up. This is an open box. It allows me to browse the contents of my computer, and I know if I look on my computer and I look on my C drive that there's a folder called Embroidery Album. You should have the same folder on your C drive, and inside of Embroidery Album is some artwork that came with the software. Okay, these are files that we all have. And I'm just going to choose this file that's called corner2.bmp, and I'm going to say open. And it comes onto my screen. Do whatever you want. Choose your machine, choose your hoop, decide what size you want the artwork. So see, the artwork is selected, and I could resize it just by dragging it bigger or smaller, place it wherever you want within your hoop. Okay, so let's just say that we want to put this little daisy corner in this bottom left corner of our embroidery hoop. We'd like to do it automatically, which means I don't want to have to draw all of these little shapes myself. So first of all, down here are the automatic digitizing tools, and notice that they're gray. Whenever a tool is gray, it means you need to do something first before you can use that tool. And in this case, if I simply select the artwork, click on it with my select tool, I click it. When the artwork is selected, the photo stitch tool becomes available. We're going to leave photo stitch for another day. The click to design tool becomes available. And notice there's a little triangle. That tells me there's more than one tool option. So I'm going to click on that and hold it and show you that we have two options. Click to design instant and click to design advanced. Let's just try instant. Click to design instant. I choose click to design instant, and in an instant, my embroidery design has been made. There it is. All the objects have been created. Look over here in my resequence bar. If I change it to colors, I can see that we've got a design that shows yellow, then red, and then orange. If I switch this from objects back to, from colors back to objects, I can see literally every object that the software made. Look, they're objects. Even though we didn't make them, they're still objects, and there's lots of them. One for every little flower petal. Remember, with the select tool, if you want, you can click and drag a box to select objects, to move them, to resize them, to rotate them. So just because we didn't digitize these objects doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to edit them or modify them. So that's a very important concept to realize, that every embroidery object is going to have a corresponding type of object. Whether you made it or the software made it, it still came from one of these tools. And you can see right here that these are actually made with the turning angle fill. And if I was to, let's just say, select this one object and zoom in really closely over it and choose reshape, there it is. You can see the points, the object points that were used to create the object. There it is. It's set to start sewing here, set to finish sewing down here. If you want, you can change the exit point to be there. If you want, you can change the angle line to be on a different angle. So that's why I said it's very important to understand the core tools, because everything after that, whether it be an automatic tool or a special effect, They all build upon these simple core tools. Okay, now, so we automatically digitize this design, and I was demonstrating, here just as an example, looking at this flower, it has, we can see here, this flower has got a satin stitch petal. This petal is satin stitch with an auto split. So what that means is if you look at the object details, see, auto split is turned on. If I turn that off, it gets rid of those. What they are is needle points. And the reason for them is the software has a setting that says if the stitch gets longer than about 7 millimeters, if I was to measure this, see, watch, I have a tool. If I go View and then Measuring Tape, the hotkeys M, Measuring Tape. I'll talk about hotkeys on another occasion. But they're basically the keys that I'm pushing on my keyboard to make things happen that you might not have known I was doing. But just as an example, if I click and drag, I can measure and see, look, right at 6.9, when it gets to 7, that's when it splits. Everything shorter is not split, everything longer is. I push Escape to let go of the tool. But remember I said it had a hotkey. If I type the letter M on my keyboard, it gives me my measuring tape. And I can just measure. I can keep measuring things, measure as many things as I want. When I'm done, I have to put Escape on my keyboard to let go of the tool. If my mouse has a scroll button. If I scroll down, it scrolls out. If I scroll up, it scrolls in. If I type, look, View, Zoom in is Z, zoom out is Shift Z. So if I push on my keyboard Shift Z, Shift Z, Shift Z, it zooms out. If I push on the keyboard Z or Z, 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 it zooms in. So those are keys that I may be pushing, and not, you will see me scroll in and out and not saying I just scrolled in or I just scrolled out. But that's what I'm doing, and those are what I call hotkeys. And the more you learn to digitize, and there's something what I call Zen, the Zen of digitizing. Takes a while to get there, but eventually you get to a point where you can just digitize and you almost don't even have to think about it. It just happens. But until then, it's sort of like learning how to golf. You know, when you first learn to golf, you got to think, okay, I got to keep my head down, keep my eye on the ball, you know, bend my knees a little bit, keep my hands just the right way. But eventually you get to the point where you just walk up to the ball, put your golf club behind it, pull her back, and let her fly. And you don't have to think about every little sort of individual step of what you just did. So when you're learning to digitize, you're going to be very focused on those steps. And that's what I'm trying to do today, is just explain those steps that so many of us have learned to just take for granted and do them every day all the time. So anyway, if I don't like this flower, and I'm thinking, oh, why is one got a split satin, the other one doesn't? Maybe I'd just like them to be all the same. I'm going to hold my Control key on my keyboard down, click on each one of them, selecting them all, and say, why don't we make them all a satin stitch, satin fill, with no split. There. So now they all have the same look. I'm going to take it one more step further, and then I'm going to let you go for the day. I'm going to start a new design again. I'm going to choose image, and I'm going to choose insert image. And again, it brings me back to my embroidery album folder. We all have it. This time I'll choose the sailboat image, sails, and say open. It's a little big for my hoop, so I'll just resize it and sort of center it in my hoop. Okay. Now, remember, I can automatically digitize, and I think we looked at the last time at doing it instant. So this time we could take a look at advanced. And when I choose advanced, a window opens up. And again, I'm not going to go through every single option in here. But in general, it has to do with this. The software says there are 6 colors available, and it's reducing it to 5. And I can see what it's done. It's made the one color of blue. The light blue and the dark blue are the same. If you want, you could say, well, you know what, I think I'd like to have all 6 colors in here. And we could click and drag that blue to be its own color, or actually what I would do is just go to here to the color reduction window, and just jack it back up to 6 and say OK, and see that it's showing me all 6 colors. Another option, see here white, it's set to fill the color white, but I don't really want it to show the color white, so I'm going to make sure that white gets omitted. So I choose omit, which means white will not get stitched. And you have fill colors and you have detail colors, and choosing a color as a detail will make sure that it comes on top, like last. So if you wanted to have these light blue sort of waves on top, then we could choose those to be a detail color, and that'll just make sure they come last. And that's basically it. If you didn't want the 2 blues, it could be as simple as this. Yeah, maybe it was okay with all the blue being one color. I could just click and drag and make the color blue include 2 different colors. You could make all the colors. If I want, I can make the color gray the same color. And see, I'm just reducing the colors. Turn the sails into the same color as yellow. So now the red is that and that. So do you understand what I'm doing is I'm reducing the number of colors, and I've just been using click and drag to do that. And you can just say OK, and it converts the embroidery as you've defined it. Now, if I don't like what I made, I can hit undo, and it puts it right back to the way it was. So that's the auto digitizing. What I call click to design is fully automatic digitizing. But there is a second choice, and it's called click to stitch, which is, I would call it semi-automatic digitizing. And you'll notice right now the click to stitch toolbar is gray, meaning I need to do something else first. In this case, I need to do the image preparation step. Now, when we use click to design, image preparation is done for us all at the same time. But if we want to use click to stitch, we need to use, and up here I have my image preparation toolbar. You've got 2 choices, image preparation and outline image preparation. Today we'll just start with the simple image preparation. So I'll click on it, and again it brings up a picture of the design, and it's got the available colors in the design were 6, and it's suggesting I reduce it to 5. If I say, oh, I think I want all 6 colors, I can just change that to be 6, and it gives me all 6 colors. And now I'll say OK. And all it did was recognize the shapes of the colors in my graphic. It was a BMP graphic. There's no vectors. So what the software basically did is it actually kind of creates vectors from the images. It says now it sees where's red and it sees where's blue. But that's it. It's just a simple step of just doing the image preparation. Once it's done, now you can see that my click to stitch tool is available, and I'm going to click to open that one up. And here you'll see the choices. There's click to fill with holes, click to fill without holes. You've got click to satin fill, turning angle satin fill, sorry. Click to center line, click to outline, and this one's called match to palette. Now, let's start with match to palette. Match to palette says when I click on something, match it to the color of the palette. So I'll choose, let's say, click to fill, click to parallel fill with holes. And I'm just going to click on an area of blue, and it fills it in. And it filled it in with blue because it knew it was blue. If I click on yellow, it'll fill it in with yellow because of the match to palette. If I turn match to palette off, and I click on, let's say, this blue area here, fills it in yellow. Why? Well, because yellow was the last color I used. If I wanted it to be dark blue, I could click dark blue on my color palette, and if I click over here, fills it in with dark blue. If I'd rather it be purple, I'll choose to purple, and then click, and I get purple, purple, purple. So the idea is, look what's happening. Every time I clicked, it made a new object. They're all parallel fill, which means I should be able to select this sun. I should be able to choose reshape. I should be able to change the stitch angle. I can change the start point. I can change the end point. I could move the shape points if I wanted to and make a funky heart-shaped sun, whatever. That's the concept. So everything builds upon those initial steps. So there I can see I've made a bunch of objects. The design will sew in the sewing sequence that I chose. Whatever I clicked on first will sew first. Whatever I clicked on second will sew second. If I change the color, the machine will stop and let me change my thread. So it's called click to stitch. I'm just going to click and drag to select all those objects and delete them. All right. The next tool, click to parallel fill without holes. The difference here is if I click on this blue shape now, it'll fill right over top of, see there was a seagull, and it filled right over it. See, if I use the same tool over here, if I use the click to parallel fill with holes, it automatically voids where the seagull is. So that's the difference between those tools. There was a hole in the shape, this seagull, and therefore, because the blue goes all the way around it, that's why it's a hole, or a, and it voided that seagull. So if you want it voided, use with holes. If you don't want it voided, use without holes. And that's a topic that comes up when I talk about Digitizer Workshop and our regular twice-a-month classes. We talk about layering. Why would you want to have a hole for the seagull versus why would you might not want to have a hole for the seagull? And what's the theory? What's the concept behind that? That's what I love to talk about. How to make beautiful embroidery designs. What if you wanted to do this design and you wanted to have all of this gray on top of the light blue, but you wanted to have the sails on top of the light blue, but you were going to void out, the center of the sails. Real simple. Look, click the rectangle tool, click light blue, click and drag to make that light blue shape. Then click my parallel fill, click the stitch tool, choose red, click on the sails. Now I'm going to select, watch this, I'll select the sails. So another way to select an object, you can click on them here. You can also click on them in your resequence bar to select them. And if I hold my control key down, I can select both of those. See, I have two red sails selected, and those red sails are over top of a blue fill, which is completely behind them. See, if I zoom in, there's blue and there's red on top of each other. So if I want the red to void where it's over top of the blue, that's this tool here, remove overlaps. See, now I can even see it right here. The blue background has had the red sails voided out, but all the other stuff's still going to be on top. So this is sort of fundamentally where we're starting to take more control. When we first just did auto digitizing, we didn't get much control over how the design turned out. But now I can come in here and there's other tools. So if I want to choose, let's just see the click to turning angle satin fill. So I'll zoom in. Look, when it's over, see the little mouse, how it turns into a kind of like a can't sign or a don't sign? If I move over top of the graphic, it can, because the tool doesn't work unless I'm over top of the graphic. So I've chose click to turning angle satin fill. If I click on this, it'll turn it, it'll fill it with turning angle satin fill. Made it red because that's my last color. I'll delete it. Let's go back to match the palette. Okay, try again, and click to turning angle satin fill. Now I get blue. See? Now if I choose click to parallel fill and click on the shape, I get a parallel fill. With parallel fill, I can change the angle of that fill. With this one, if I choose the turning angle fill and choose reshape, I can see all of the different angle lines that were used to create the different angles of this design. And I can even modify them. I can even move the shape nodes. Notice this. When you create a shape with, remember, right click for curve, left click for corner, curve points show up as circles. Corner points show up as squares. Watch, I'll left click right in between these two circles, and it makes a square. Now if I move it, see, the square is a corner point, therefore the shape, sort of hard to see. Let me hide the image. I can see a little better. Hide my hoop. See a little better. See, circles give you curved lines. Squares give you straight points or corner points. And I could change them. See this corner point here? It's a square. If I click on it, which makes it kind of highlighted purple, and then hit my space bar, it'll change it to a curve. And if I space bar again, it changes it back to curve. So if you've got a point that's a curve and you want it to be a straight, you just go and choose it and put on your straight, your space bar to toggle back and forth between curve points and straight points. Okay, so I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Remember, this is the button display image, so that's where if you're wondering where my boat went, I just hit display image to hide it for a minute. Display image brings it back. So that's really the concept, is that I can just use this tool to say, yeah, maybe let's digitize the design. Maybe I'll just finish it now. Maybe what I'll do is just turn the visualizer off, click on this tool, there's the yellow, do a little bird, click on these parts to fill them in. So I've taken some control over the sewing sequence, the type of stitching. I could take control of the type of underlay and whatever. So that's how the software really works. It's object-based embroidery, and that was my goal for today. So here we've come 2 hours later. I spent the last 90 minutes talking about what I consider to be the fundamental, the first place to know. So what did I say? Well, we did a little review of the desktop just to orient ourselves. We really learned about the core tools. And remember, parallel fill is the outline tool. Left click for corners, right click for curves. When you hit enter, fills it in with thread. This is the select tool. You can select it, you can move it, resize it, or stretch it. If you click again, the handles turn open to choose the rotation option. If you choose the Object Details tool, you can change the type of stitch from weave fill to be, let's say, a motif fill. Choose from a pattern of motifs, any number of different motifs that could be applied to fill in the shape. So you choose your motif to fill in your shape, say OK, and that's what fills in your shape. That's Object Details. We learned about the 2-point tool for turning angle thread. We learned about, this is something I maybe didn't say, when you create 2 points, 1, 2, 1, 2, try to keep track of the sides. You might need to say top, bottom, because if you say top, bottom, and then you go bottom and top, you cross sides and the stitches will twist on themselves. So you might need to say inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside, or top, bottom, or left, right, left, right, left, right. But it's the 2-point tool versus the outline tool. We learned about the rectangle tool, circle tool, single line tool to make all different types of single run lines, whether that be a straight stitch line, or we have a motif run line, embossed run line, all sorts of different lines that you can choose, and it'll place a decorative pattern along your line. We learned about the reshape tool, which gives us the ability to change the stitch angle, which gives us the ability to change the shape, which gives us the ability to move the starting points and the exit points for our shapes. And we learned about some of the automatic digitizing, fully automatic click to design versus semi-automatic click to stitch. And that's where I'd like to leave you today. I'd really like for everybody to go ahead and try these things. Try all of these tools. Try the automatic digitizing. Try to make something, and that's when you'll find questions. Now, on the topic of questions, I'm going to come back up. I'm still here. I'm going to pop open my control panel, make sure that I still have an audience. Well, everybody's still here. Sounds great. I'll pop open my questions box and just give it a quick look through, but you know what? Good for you guys. I don't see a lot of questions in here. There are a couple, and I will read them, but to be honest, it was Betty and Mary. You guys asked me a couple questions, and I just don't want to take the time to read it while I'm in class. So if you don't mind, if you want to ask me a question, just email me, and I'll be very happy to help you with your questions. Now, all of that said, I certainly hope that you enjoyed today's class. Now, remember, if you want to learn from me about digitizing, then you need to be a member of Digitizer Workshop. And for all of the members of Digitizer Workshop, our next class is, well, this is wrong. It's next Friday, not Thursday. Friday, August the 31st at 1 p.m. And that is going to be the review class for a special, usually I have a design challenge going. And right now the design challenge is called Leaves. And I have received some really beautiful designs that people have made of leaves. I received designs from people that told me, Trevor, this is the first design I've ever made, and thank you very much for all that you've shown me. I was able to create this design, and congratulations to all of the people that are sending in challenge designs. in the class, I will be reviewing those designs, and my goal is not to pick them apart. It's to find something that we can all learn from each other's designs. These are some of the designs that I've made in the previous few classes. We did some embossed lotus flower. I did some bobbin work. Every Digitizer Workshop class is a new set of projects that I come up with, and we learn about, really interesting things. So I look forward to the class next week. If any of you are still working on your challenge designs, please return them to me as soon as possible. I'll need them by Tuesday, really at the latest, so that I can be prepared for the class on Friday. Also next week, I will be announcing the class dates for Digitizer Workshop number 14. But you can expect the same as in the past. There will be a class every second Wednesday, so 2 classes per month. And I will have a new class date for Getting Started number 2. But the next class will not be open to the public. You must be a member of Digitizer Workshop to get the Getting Started classes. You're welcome to join through me directly on my website. You're welcome to go into your local sewing store and join my classes through your local sewing store. If they're not aware of how to do that, just have them ring me up and I'll explain it to them. But it's very simple, not very hard, and everybody is welcome to be part of these classes. So, I really hope you enjoyed today's class. I will be distributing the class to all members of Digitizer Workshop. I will also distribute the class for people who are not members of Digitizer Workshop by posting it on my YouTube channel, which will mean that people will be able to come and watch this class for free and learn more about me and Digitizer Workshop and what it is that everything is all about. So, all of that said, I hope you enjoyed the class. I thank you for attending, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.